Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Pac-12 Chat Show Live here on the Voice of College Football channel. I'm Tony, as always, here with Tim, Rick, and Chris, and we are excited to talk to you guys tonight about the Pac-12 and the week that was. How are you guys doing tonight, guys?
Doing great, Tony. Good to see everybody.
Good.
Good to see you. Everybody have a good weekend?
Tremendous.
Excitement. Well, we're glad to have the whole gang back in town, which is exciting. And let's dive in, gang, to what we've got for tonight as everybody here kind of joins up. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the adventure of the Pac-4 and some really interesting stuff that came out today on Yahoo, today in the LA Times, and kind of break down that, which will be kind of interesting. So hold your horses for that. But we're going to start off tonight with something that actually is a couple weeks delayed, which is that we want to dig into doing just a quick look coming out of the beginning of fall camp and coming after media days at the teams themselves. I know, real football. Who would have thought? So without further ado, let's dig in, guys. And let's start with our first team. So coming as we get ready for the season start here, what do we think about the Cougs? We're going to do kind of quick thoughts for each of us. And then, like I said, then we'll go into talking about the future of the conference. And then we'd love to take your guys' calls. Tim, what do you think about the Cougs?
Well, like we just talked about in pre-show, to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about the Cougs this year. I do. Obviously, Jake Dickert coming back. They showed some strength early in the season last year, then seemed to fade throughout. I don't know exactly what's expected of them, to be honest with you, so I'm just going to pass my time to somebody else.
It'll be interesting with Cam Ward, right? Because I think the preseason hype machine for Cam Ward last season, was like he was bunched in with those other people of like, oh, we got Penix transferring and Bo Nix transferring and Cam Ward transferring, and you don't really hear Cam Ward's name in that bunch anymore. But I do remember that scary game, that Oregon had up in the Palouse. And I'm not saying that Oregon State is going to lose that game, but I think that Oregon State has to be a little bit, Oregon State's got its eyes real wide and real happy for things this year. But I think that one of the early tests for them, more so than I think people think, I think it'll only be like a touchdown line or something. Like 30% chance for the Cougs or something, but that's a spot that they can rise up. It's one of those teams that's good enough to not win the conference themselves, but maybe have a say in who does.
Well, I think the Cougs season is going to rest on the improvement of Cam Ward. He's the first returning quarterback starter to Washington State since Luke Falk in 2017. But take a look at that schedule. They start off at Colorado State and at Wisconsin. So not easy to start two games on the road when Washington State has a shaky offensive line, and they lost 4 key receivers that totaled almost 2,000 yards last year. They have a couple of transfers coming in from UNLV and Fresno State. Their linebacker situation is developing. They do have 2 outstanding defensive linemen in Ron Stone Jr. and Brennan Jackson that will be returning. But it's going to be a challenge for the Cougs to start their first 2 games on the road. You would like to see them in this year have Northern Colorado at home to start off to get some continuity and consistency. But the Cougs are going to go as far as the development of Cam Ward takes them, especially in this very heavy quarterback conference. Tony?
And of course, it froze right at the moment as I was speaking. I think you're right, Rick. I think that we're going to see what happens with their transfers, but I think that their victimhood here is that if this team was playing in the Pac in 2019 or 2020 or even 2021, this would be one of the better teams in the Pac. But I think this year they may struggle a little bit with the degree of competition. But I'm really looking forward. Wisconsin is going to the Palouse. So that's going to be quite a game.
Okay, I mistook that. I guess that's their ranking. I thought it said at Wisconsin. My bad.
Oh, no, yeah, that's their ranking, yeah. So because they went last year, if you remember, actually, Washington State last year, they had one of my favorite Twitter posts. They had a graphic of the Wisconsin Stadium, and after it was Wazoo won, it said, jump up, and sit down. So
that's going to be a true test. That's going to be a true test against Luke Fickell's team up in the Palouse. But good luck to the Cougs this year.
All right, moving on. Colorado. Guys, is this one of the worst teams in the country again, or are the Deion heroes right? What is going to happen in Boulder?
It's not one of the worst teams in the country because Stanford is in this conference. But I am going to pump the brakes on like the people that think this team is going to win. I mean, I've seen some outlandish things of like 8 games and whatnot. Those people are insane. 6, like people saying 6 is insane. Like 3 or 4, I still think is would be pretty good. 4 would be pretty good with this schedule coming off of what they're coming off of. I do have a team that I think is, and we can talk about it later when we talk about them, but I do have another team in this conference that I think is a lot like what Colorado has done, but is not getting the pub that Colorado is. I think it's the Colorado that people don't expect. The more I think about it, but like the slate is really hard. They could very easily go 1 and 2 out of conference, and then it doesn't get very much easier. I think the Arizona State team that they play at Arizona State is pretty good. I mean, what wins at home against Arizona, Stanford, and Colorado, and then the 4th one somewhere else to get that season win total. I don't know. They might be better. The things that I see out of camp, I don't necessarily love, but I'm getting older, so what do I know? But yeah, I don't quite see it the way the hype machine sees it.
You're on mute, Tim.
There's some great players. Travis Hunter is going to be amazing, probably on both sides of the ball. This one, probably the best athletes in the entire country. Shooter Sanders has come in with a lot of hype. We'll see what he can play, how he plays, and on against Power 5 defenses. But I just think at the end of the day, they did bring in a couple of guys on defensive line, but they're just razor thin. A couple injuries, and they may be lucky to win any games. So it's a good thing, like you said, that we got Stanford on there, Colorado. I see some wins. I just don't see more than 3 wins on their entire schedule. So good luck, Colorado.
I think you're going to see this is a good comparison to USC. Obviously, USC didn't have as many transfers that came in as Colorado did. And I'm not comparing Lincoln Riley to Deion Sanders. Obviously, Lincoln Riley had coached 5 years before coming to USC as a head coach. Deion Sanders was a head coach at Jackson State. So he's going to have to step it up and show what he's made of at the Pac-12 level. There's been a lot of discussion about him, and we're going to get to see what kind of staff he has. And that schedule at the beginning is brutal. And I don't see 3 wins. Really, I don't. At TCU, Nebraska, Colorado State. Then you got to go to Oregon. And Oregon is going to put a thumping on them. And then you got USC in Boulder. And I've seen some things on social media that is a big game. And don't be surprised if Colorado puts up a fight. I don't see that at all. And then you have ASU and Stanford. There's a couple possible wins there, but that's it. They're not going to win more than 3 games. And I just think that their depth and injuries are going to take a toll on this team. And it's going to be a tough last year in the Pac-12. But, hey, they can go to the Big 12 and they'll probably do pretty well.
Yeah, I think they will do better against less competition than they're going to face this year.
Yeah.
Erica wants to know who wins Colorado, Nebraska. Erica, I think Nebraska runs them off the field, but I guess we'll see. Anybody disagree?
Yeah, GBR.
No. And no disrespect to Colorado. I'm just telling the truth. They have a better chance
and they're
of competing with the Big 12. Then this is going to be a fantastic year in the Pac-12. So what a way to go. You've pretty much been a bottom feeder all 11 years. And so you're going to be a bottom feeder in all 12 years going to the Big 12. I mean, you're basically buffalo meat. That's what you are.
I understand the computers don't play games, but like some of the computer stuff that I look at only has Colorado's like favored in 2 games.
Yeah, I believe that. All right, moving on. Arizona, Jed Fish. And I tell you guys, I love Jed Fish, but what can he do with this team, guys? Give us your quick takes.
I need to follow that because my quip is exactly on that point. Ever since he went to Arizona, there were UCLA people from when he was like 1 year with Josh Rosen at UCLA that think this guy is like God's gift to coaching. And we talk every year about how Arizona has, they're building, and he did, like, granted, he came into a very terrible situation. But at some point it has to transition from like, oh yeah, he's building, and like, oh yeah, he's doing a good job of like rebuilding this program that was not very good situation when he came into it, and eventually needs to do a little bit more. And in my opinion, it's Jed Fish's year to either make a bowl game or start to question what the ultimate ceiling is. And I don't know if they do. And we'll see. Maybe they'll be better again and have a win total that's not very different. But we kind of said that last year. And, real quick, like, quarterback is amazing. And we talked a lot last year about like good DTR, bad DTR. And I feel like you could do kind of the same thing on the field with Delora, where like good Delora is amazing. Bad Delora is going to lose you games. And unless they fix something with that Swiss cheese defense, then I think it's going to be hard for them to get a bowl game. But I'm talking a lot of crap for a team that lost to them. So I'll stop.
Well, no, your analysis is spot on. It'll be Delora, and like you said, he giveth and he taketh away, right? He'll make some great plays, and then he'll just throw into triple coverage or try to, on third down, try to do too much, and they're in field goal range, and he'll throw an interception. So it's going to be on him. They lose Singer to USC. They still have Cowing, who I think is going to have a great season. They have McMillan still as well. So as far as receiving is fine, but also a really bad defense is going to go from what they gave up like 35, 36 points a game last year. They lost Keon Barrs to USC as well as Christian Rule and Wallace. They're probably their 2 best defensive players. So a bad defense is probably going to get worse.
Yeah, and that's the key, is how good is that defense going to be? And you guys nailed it. It's Jaden Delora. Is it going to be good Jaden Delora or bad Jaden Delora? He's going to put up numbers, and they have a great receiving core. And Jed Fish is an offensive-minded coach, but it's going to be the defense. And that, when you're playing against good teams with great quarterbacks, the margins are very, very small. And so if you turn that ball over and you have a porous defense, and as the season progresses, those games that you thought maybe in fall camp that you have a chance of competing, they go away. So I see Arizona winning 5 games. I don't see them winning 6 games and going to a bowl. And they come to the Coliseum. They haven't beat USC since 2012. And I think we're going to put, number 11 or number 12 on them in a row.
I like it. I agree with you guys. I think they're going to struggle more than they think. What about Arizona State? And we'll try to go quick on some of these. Guys, I don't know what to think about this team. What do you guys say?
I think that this might be the Colorado that people think Colorado is, but it's actually Arizona State, in the sense that they have like 50 new head coach, 50 new faces through the transfer portal. Like, they like what they have. I think they think that they have talent there. And I think that that week they're going to roll over Southern Utah, and I think they have a decent chance, probably a bigger chance than more people think, to seriously turn some heads in that Oklahoma State game.
Yeah, Elijah Badger was awesome last year. I don't know who they're going to settle in on for their quarterback. I mean, I'm going to laugh if it's Drew Pine, but they got the freshman Rashada coming in, and then Bourget, who started playing pretty good towards the end of the season. It's going to be interesting to see. Look at the change in Nix with Dillingham under his tutelage. It'll be interesting to see how these quarterbacks do, having him come in there and his system. Maybe simplify it for some of these guys. Simplify it enough, maybe for a freshman Rashada to come in. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But they're not gonna be competing for the conference.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be challenging. We're gonna get to see Dillingham, how good of a coach he's going to be, and what kind of staff did he hire? Because that's going to be key, is to keep these guys motivated in the games. It's going to be a rough season. You got a lot of new players, transfer players. I think they have the most in the conference, excluding Colorado. And so they could take a couple quick L's. They might lose. I guess it turns out to be a Big 12 conference game, a preview of it, Oklahoma State and Arizona State. But you could stumble there. And against Fresno State's legit. And they can come in and take Sparky's lunch without any question. And then USC is going to come in and rock you. So you could start off 1-3. And what happens then? So it's going to be a learning experience. But we'll get to see what kind of coach Dillingham is, like you mentioned, Tim. Quarterback development. So I wouldn't be surprised that they go with Rashada at some point during the season. Hey, let's ride with this young kid and let's move forward as a team.
I think you're right. You guys are all right on them. I'm not really sure what to expect. I will say, though, based on what we saw this week from the Harbaugh situation with the NCAA Committee on Infractions, and Arizona State did stuff that's way worse and has fought nastily to avoid responsibility for it. I fear that whatever happens this season, they're going to be back to starting over real soon with some NCAA sanctions. All right. The Fighting Huskies. Guys, Justin Wilcox has got himself some transfers. Is this the year Cal turns the corner?
I'll go short. You said under 30 seconds, so I'll keep it really short. Whatever Oski brought in, he lost. They lost some guys to the transfer portal. They were already struggling team on defense. And they didn't add much as far as offense. So I think they're going to have a really rough season. And there goes the alarm.
They have a couple of really good running backs. I think that they're a well-coached team. I think that Wilcox gets a lot more crap than he deserves for what he does there. That being said, I'm tired of watching this team lose a bunch of games by one score. That would be shocking. The problem is that North Texas team is, I'm not saying that they're good, but they're a lot better than people realize. And I could see anything from 3-0 to 1-2 happening to start the season. And then, after that, and I hope they do win those, because the schedule does not give them a lot of favors having to play. They do get Stanford, but they have, everyone in the North plus, I guess they skip. No, they don't skip. They play everyone in conference. They play all the top 6. So the schedule does not give them any favors. I think it's rough. I'd love to see them get to a bowl game in the last year of the Pac-12, as long as it's not at UCLA's cost, because the way things sound, we might have to pay for all kinds of things. So, so that's how I feel about it.
Well, Cal's going to have to prove on offense, and they did bring in a new offensive coordinator, Jake Spivatal. Cal scored about 24 points a game last year. Primarily, they were kept in games because of their defense. So they have a transfer quarterback from TCU, Sam Jackson, and they also have a transfer from North Carolina State, Ben Finley. So those two are going to compete. And, the good thing is with Jake Spivatal, He's had experience working with quarterbacks. He was at Cal working with Davis Webb back in 2016, and he's also coached the likes of Johnny Manziel, Kyler Murray, and Geno Smith. So we're going to get to see what Jake Spivatal can do. They're going to have Auburn at home. And that just for amusement's sake is must-see TV. If there's must-see TV in the Pac-12, it's a War Damn Eagle coming from the South and going to Berkeley, California. I mean, that is just beautiful, man. But congratulations to Auburn, because 20 years ago, they came to LA to play USC. And what happened? They lost 24-17. Let's see if Cal can give them a 20-year reunion coming back to the Golden State. But I don't see that happening, though. I think Hugh Freeze will have something ready for Oski. And good luck to Cal this year.
I'm going to go out on a limb here really quick and say that 2023 Cal is not going to be at the same caliber as 2003 USC. I don't want to be controversial, but I'm going there.
They're not, but Auburn isn't probably as good as they were in 2003 either.
That's also true. That is also true. Yeah. Now, would it not be the most Pac-12 thing ever for them to lose to North Texas and then beat Auburn?
It's
and then lose Idaho?
It's completely possible. It's more likely that they beat Auburn than they lose to North Texas, but both of those things can happen, and the percentages are not that far away from each other. Math-wise.
We love it. And that Auburn game, by the way, is a Pac-12 After Dark, one of the last of the kind. And guys, I don't know if it's true. Oski's looking for a media deal. Cocaine Bear is now streaming live on Prime Video. So if you're done with Red, White, and Blue, you can check out Cocaine Bear. We have not been able to confirm yet whether Oski will be starring in the sequel. But if the money doesn't come through, for football next year, he may need some options. So all right, the Ducks. What do we think of the Quackers?
Well, I'll start. I guess the biggest storyline is going to be the fact that Bo Nix was a huge turnaround for them, played much better than he did, speaking of Auburn. But the issue here is losing how much call him Willingham. What's the guy down in there? Yeah.
Willingham.
Losing your OC, who's a big part of the turnaround for him. Dillingham did have that turnaround for him. It's going to be interesting to see. You saw what happened to the Ducks when he was playing hurt or when he was out. If he regresses in any way, that would be a bad sign. It's going to be interesting to see what the new offensive coordinator could do. I mean, I'm not really familiar with the guy very much at all. He might be, Stein might come in. He might be the man. He might be, the next great offensive coordinator. But we do know that they're going to play some pretty good defense. As far as talent goes, they're the only probably person in the entire conference that could rival USC for overall talent in the conference. Again, there's some tough games. The fact that USC is playing up at Autzen, that's going to be well in their favor. But they're at Utah, and I think are they at? I can't see that. Sorry, it's too small. Oh yeah, and they're playing in Seattle, and they're playing at Rice-Eccles. But they do get USC at home. I still think that schedule is going to make it difficult. So they're not going to be a team, I think, that's going to make it to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think this is, like you said, I'll keep it short because you hit on a lot of the same points. Is that I was going to say is talent-wise, they're it's the tier of talent is USC and Oregon. What I need them to do more than anything is win that game at the truck stop in Lubbock, Texas, because if that doesn't go their way, then it does a lot for the narrative of what the top 4 or 5 or I would like to say 6 teams in the Pac-12 kind of are this year. And they have nothing around it schedule-wise, so it's not like they can sleepwalk through the other 5 games that they have to start the year. So they sure as hell better be ready to go to Lubbock on a team that a lot of people, I didn't know they were going to be ranked, but I remember even months ago, people kind of being high on this Texas Tech team. So that's a game to look at. And then, like you said, schedule-wise, just at Washington, at Utah, And I think even at Arizona State, sandwiched between that SC game and Oregon State game, I'm not saying that Arizona State's going to win, but weird stuff happens in the desert.
And really quickly, I forgot also, they lost, was it Forsyth? Who's their center? They lost a lot of guys on their offensive line. They had a very solid, one of the better offensive lines, but now it looks like the guys are across the way in Corvallis too, but that's the difference. We'll talk about that a little later. But it's going to see how quickly they can gel that offensive line, because they had some really good linemen, and they lost 3 or 4 of them on that line. So it'll be interesting how quickly they can all gel.
Yeah, I do think it's the second best team, but there are definitely questions. Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
No, you guys hit it hit it well. And Oregon has a new offensive coordinator, as you mentioned, Tim. It's Will Stein from UTSA. So we're going to get to see how quick he's going to gel with Bo Nix. And unfortunately, the Ducks, they squandered a 10-point lead with 3 minutes to go last year against Washington. And part of that is Bo Nix got nicked up with his ankle. We saw what happened to Oregon State against Oregon State. And so the defense is going to be the question. And Dan Lanning is a defensive-minded coach. He's based Oregon as being SEC West. And so it's upon him to correct this defense, him and Tosh Lupoi. Tosh Lupoi was let go by Alabama. Tosh Lupoi is known to carry a big suitcase with a lot of bags. So he's got the chance to go ahead and prove himself as a defensive-minded coach. They did get some key defensive transfers. Jordan Birch out of South Carolina, a defensive end. They also got the kid from safety from Fresno State, whose quality, his name's Evan Williams, not to be confused with his cousin from another mother, Jack Daniels. They also got a few other defensive transfer portal players. So that's what's going to be key, is can you stop some of these high-powered offenses and not have the same results as last year? Same onus is going to be on USC. So we'll see what the Ducks defense does. And you expect Bo Nix to be Bo Nix. I mean, you saw today on social media, they did the a la Joey Harrington. They put up a billboard in Midtown, something about Bo and the Heisman.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't think he's going to pull a Joey. Like, I don't even think he's going to probably last as long into the season as a serious candidate, but we could be wrong. We'll see. He's a great player. I think they had a lot of loss. They had a lot more losses last year than people think as far as personnel goes. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to be interesting. All right, guys, the Beavs, always a favorite of the show crowd. Real quick, what do we think?
This is college. This is the college football fans' college football team this year, in the sense that if you're like anti all realignment, anti the way things are going versus the way things were, I mean, this is the squad to get behind, right? They have a chance to have one of the best seasons they've ever had in program history. I don't know if they will do it. DJ comes in at quarterback. Even people like to be like, oh yeah, well, DJ, wasn't very good at Clemson, whatever you want to say. It doesn't take a lot for them to get better quarterback play out of that position than they had last year. He could be like extremely pedestrian and still be way better than what they had last year. I've said all the time, Jonathan Smith's a great coach. Now people finally realize it. I mean, what a great job this school did, and like this program did, and Jonathan Smith did as an alum coming back home and just like absolutely building this into something that's legitimate. PFF has their offensive line as like one of the top 10 offensive lines in the country. They have the freshman of the year returning at running back. Like, there's a lot of really good things going on at this team, and their schedule is probably the easiest outside of UCLA's. Like, I think UCLA might be the only team that has an easier schedule in conference. There's a lot to like about the Beavs, and I think that if you are a person that's upset about the changes going on, that this is a team you have to root for, because they, more than anyone else, are on the ultimate screw everyone tour. We're going to show you how stupid you are for leaving us out of this.
And I'll tell you, there's actually some funny historical precedent for that. because that's exactly what happened in 1958 as well. They had their best season in school history as they got left out of conference realignment.
The biggest worry, so I want to see that as well, Chris. I want to see that Cinderella story, right? Since they're one of the schools that's getting, because I mean, listen, what Cal and Stanford, it's your own fault. What happened to you is just what happened to you. You could have done much better with your sports programs, but nobody, since I've been watching football in the Pac-12, has always consistently done more with less than Oregon State and Washington State. But unfortunately, Oregon State is going to have difficulty. They lost both those corners, Wright and Austin, to the NFL. Omar Spates, was a lot of noise and news about the fact that he transferred, a great linebacker, transfers out to LSU. So they lose a hell of a lot on what was probably one of the better defenses in the Pac-12, but that's a lot. I don't know. Maybe we can get Connor Johnson or someone to come in later on and explain to us how they filled those shoes. But, that was that defense. They gave USC's offense a hell of a lot of trouble. It was because of the quality of talent they did have in Spates and their corners. I think, Chris, you're going to anger the Gulbranson fan club with your comments, but I do think that DJ is going to do much better. I think the fact that he has a great offensive line, this is where the strength's going to be in this team, is a great offensive line with probably one of the better running backs. And Damian Martinez, freshman, came on the scene last year, is I'm sure going to have a great, outstanding follow-up year, sophomore year, following that offensive line. If DJ can get that run support, my worry though is this: who's he going to throw to? I mean, he's probably going to throw to his tight ends. He has some decent tight ends. A transfer, I think, from Cal, big guy from Cal, with some speed. But who are can someone here name a couple of their receivers that, if you have one good receiver, that's fine, but you need to have a couple receivers that can do some damage. I'm just hoping that Damian Martinez can run the ball enough behind that offensive line to give DJ the opportunity to get those, to have them stack the box so he has some nice passing lanes and a lot of guys running wide open. So I don't think they repeat. Maybe they get to the 10 wins. I would be shocked though with that losses to defense, unless someone can prove me otherwise.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jonathan Smith, he's gonna only benefit DJ Uiagalelei, the transfer from Clemson. And Tim, you pointed out, who is he going to throw to? Yes, he's got Jermaine Terry II, the Cal transfer tight end.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, he's also got another tight end with some size, Jake Overman, and then he's got a couple returning receivers in Anthony Gould and Silas Bolden. But they're going to have to step up. And maybe they do, because they got a better quarterback. Gulbranson wasn't the quarterback. Chance Nolan wasn't the quarterback. They had a solid defense. They've got a solid offensive line. And they got Martinez at running back. They have Fenwick as well. They have so much depth at running back that Jam Griffin, who's a great running back himself, just transferred a couple weeks ago to Ole Miss. So love their schedule. They could start off 10-0. I love where their bye is right after UCLA. And because they're going to take a trip to the desert, and they could stumble there, but Oregon State's defense will keep them in that game, and they'll give Jaden Delore a lot of problems, and they'll be able to score points on their own. Literally, they could be 10-0, and then they face Washington and Oregon to close out the season. And yes, this is America's team. This is the team. This is the little engine that could. And all the media that wanted to kill the Pac-12 and that were throwing matches on the gasoline, guess what? They're going to be throwing roses at the Oregon State Beavers. They are going to turn their color so quick. You could see it. You know what? And all those haters out there in the Big 12 country that wanted the Pac-12 to die, they're going to be Oregon State Beaver fans too, because that's what everybody is. They love a small-time story, the underdog. And that's who Oregon State is, but they're one heck of an underdog. I look for them to qualify for the Pac-12 championship. So good luck, Beavs.
Hey, I can't follow that. Moving on, guys. Stanford. Is this going to be a bad? They got some great recruits coming, but is this going to be a bad team this year?
I'm going Washington State. I'm going to save my time for some other teams. Good luck, Stanford Cardinal. It was nice knowing you. You're going to have a rough season.
Yeah, I took too much time on that last one. Stanford, you know what? I mean, good luck. good luck in your last year in the Pac-12. And whether you go independent, the Big Ten, or the ACC, that's the news of this college football season.
So the last time they pulled a head coach out of the lower levels, it was a guy named Jim Harbaugh, and it worked out pretty well for them over time. But I don't think that Troy Taylor is going to be able to quite get it done right away. But I am interested, and he has been recruiting again, which is something that they definitely have to do. Their former head coach has been hanging around Westwood watching his son play football, but we haven't hired him as an analyst or anything yet. I think he's just being a dad. But I'm interested to see, like, I mean, I think that they're still better than Hawaii. Let me check something real quick. Yeah, I mean, they're still. Hawaii was actually Hawaii is the game that they're most favored in, and then I always think of like Colt Brennan, Hawaii. I always have to like catch myself. No, that's the game they're most favored in, actually. And then Sac State is maybe the only other game that they're going to be favored in. It's going to be tough sledding for this team, but I'm kind of interested to see. You can see culture shifts and like attitude shifts and whatnot, or like how a program is going to be in the future sometimes in year one, even if you catch glimpses. So if you're a sicko like me and you watch terrible teams play football against each other sometimes, then I think there's some interesting things that come out of it. But I think that, I don't think that they're going to be very good, and I don't think anyone does think that they're going to be very good, and they might be one of the worst teams in the Power 5 that doesn't quite exist anymore.
Yeah, I think they better lock in some kind of conference something before anybody sees this team this year, because it's not going to be pretty. All right. High atop the hills of Westwood, what do we think we're going to see?
Chris, why don't you go first?
All right, I'll cede my time during SC and talk just a little bit longer here, but I kind of like the fact that we're not rated and no one really thinks that we're going to do anything, even though we have a season win total of 8.5 because of our glorious schedule. It is beautiful. I don't know. You have teams that with 2 conference losses that make the championship game sometimes, like last year with Utah. We only have 3 really, really hard games. And I think the way Oregon State's schedule works out and what a darling they are, I think that game at Oregon State is going to play a way bigger role in who might make the conference championship game than people are thinking right now. There's the reports coming out of camp. I can't remember a time where coaches talk like this as much at UCLA, but I think this is the deepest team we've ever had since Kelly's been there. Granted, he took it down to the studs to start. But in terms of offensive skill position players, it's as deep as it's ever been. I think the corners are still an issue. To a lesser extent, the safeties. People like our front 7. People love our linebackers, led by your old guy. But Latu as an edge rusher is getting a bunch of preseason hype. I can see this team legitimately being anywhere from disaster season, 7 wins, to great season, 10 wins. And I can't tell you the last time we've won 10 games, much less in the regular season. It's not something that happens for us all, but the schedule is so weak that if we get lucky in the right ones, I think there might be some oh shit, Chip figured it out moments from other fan bases if things go magically. But I think a lot of it has to do with who's playing quarterback and how well they're playing quarterback, because that's not really clear yet.
Yeah, okay, so we'll start with the schedule. So you did say about the season, but you guys do play the Utes in Rice Eccles. Granted, that's going to be early, so I don't know what the situation at quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that situation for them at quarterback when we got to Utah, but I mean, depending on what's going on there, I totally agree. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, if you got a healthy Rising, that's we always know they can beat anybody almost in the country, I think. And then you got USC at the Coliseum. I think those games are going to be pretty tough for you. But I do. You brought up Law too. Then next to Trice in Washington, I think he's probably one of the better pass rushers in the conference. He definitely is a stud. It's going to be weird. I think I talked about this last time we talked about UCLA. It's going to be weird to see another quarterback besides DTR since he was there for so long. It will be interesting to see, if you can bring along Dante Moore that fast, or who's going to win that thing. I would not be excited if you do have to go to anyone but Dante Moore, move along fast. You get to break him in. You got three layups really. So you get to Utah. Would be interested to see how much play he gets. Is there talk of him starting just right off the bat?
I mean, it's. I think they're both going to play against Coastal. Maybe, I don't know. I hope it doesn't get too far into like Chip experimental out of conference games. I don't care time, because I would like to win those games instead of the shenanigans that we've seen before. But I think that Garbers is more like Garbers knows the offense the best, and I think Dante is the most talented, but has some things to learn as a freshman. But I think he'll end up being the guy, but I don't know. I actually think our fifth string quarterback has seen time in games that actually matter, in snaps that actually matter. So like whoever starts is going to be able to take a snap. It's just a matter of like how high the ceiling is.
Yeah, and we say Chip Kelly. I mean, he schemes. He's a great X's and O coach, and it will be good. Plus, he has whoever that quarterback is has Sturvant from Cal. You got Ford from USC, and I guess you said Loya was your guy from last year. That
there's
also
a few. Yeah, the wide receiver room is as deep as it's ever been since I've been a fan of UCLA, and we have two really good running backs. I think everyone likes to talk about Carson Steele, which, don't get me wrong, I'm super excited about him, but like rumbles in the program are also really love TJ Harden, and I think it might be like a 1A 1B kind of thing.
Well, they have some big shoes to fill from last year, so it'll be interesting. I just think that they got some really tough games. They have I think they'll have a hard time getting to Las Vegas as well.
I don't have much to add, but you did state, Chris, that, and that's what's important. So you have to have a strong running game, and that's going to help whoever's going to be quarterback, whether it's Colin Schlee, Garbers, or Dante Moore. And they'll figure that out in the first three games, as you guys have mentioned. But if you have a strong running game, that takes pressure off of a new starting quarterback. You have the elite wide receiver room. That's going to help as well. So they can bring along the quarterback. I like their schedule, but they are going to have challenges. That first road game against Utah, we don't know who's going to be the quarterback at Utah, how healthy Cam Rising is. It's reported that their backup quarterback had to go to the hospital, and he's out for an extended period of time, several games. But we don't know the official amount of time, but they could be on their third string quarterback. So we'll see what happens. But UCLA, I think that they've got the team to bring along the quarterback, whoever that's going to be over time. And hey, look for UCLA with an outside shot getting to the Pac-12 championship.
I think you're right, Rick. I worry a little bit about the lack of experience at quarterback, but it's a pretty strong team and a really weak schedule. So I think that's a good recipe. So I think we may see a good year for the Bruins. All right, guys. I know you guys do a show on this every single week, so we'll try to keep it quick. SC, fight on. What do we think about the Trojans? And what do we think is new? I mean, we could do this for an hour and a half, but what do we think just kind of new coming out of fall camp?
Well, I saw this coming, so I tabled my Washington State time and my Stanford time to actually get something might be interesting, but I'll keep it short. We know the offense led by Caleb Williams is going to be one of the best, if not the best offense in the country, led by arguably Lincoln Riley, the best signal caller in the game, bring in just talent everywhere. The offensive line we lost guys. We lost Voorhees and we lost Nealon, but they brought in some big guys to replace them. I'm really excited to watch you guys Emmanuel Pregnon, gigantic guy from Wyoming, transfer. I think USC's run game is going to get a lot better. You bring in a guy, Marshawn Lloyd from the other USC from South Carolina. And then a couple of freshmen, but the freshman to watch out for you guys this year is Quentin Joyner. I think this kid could be really special at USC. He's a freshman. Our line's big and nasty, and I think that you're going to see a lot of running, and this guy can take it to the house at any moment. But the time really should be spent on the defense. Everyone keeps talking about how USC can't field the defense. They're too small. They can't do this, can't do that. I can't wait for these offenses in the Pac-12 to see what USC has brought in from across the country. You bring in the headline by Bear Alexander from Georgia, had a couple tackles for losses in the championship game. Anthony Lucas from Texas A&M. And then you'll have another guy from Purdue and Jack Sullivan. And then you also have that spacey in the middle with Keon Bars. Guy's massive. He was at Arizona 2 years. 2 years ago, he was all conference. So some of you guys should know who he is. And I just stacked on defense. They brought in guy after guy after guy on defense. That was our issue. And tackling was an issue. So they decided to go into also the portal, and they picked up a linebacker from Oklahoma State and Mason Cobb. This guy he's already shown that he has the confidence. He's already got the respect of the team. This guy is going to be the captain of the defense. And then speaking of captain, they've named freshman from Manny, Louisiana, absolute stud. They're calling him Captain America because just as how great he is. And now all of a sudden I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Freshman Rick.
Tackett Curtis.
Freshman? You just can't hear me.
Tackett Curtis.
Tackett Curtis is just going to be simply amazing. And we're so deep there. You got like Rajon Davis, he's been dinged up. But as far as linebacker, and I'm not even talking about Eric Gentry, who before he got injured was on his way to probably being an all Pac-12 guy as well. So defense is insanely improved. Freshman Christian Pierce also is going to flash at some point during the season. And then I'm just excited to see the guys that have been hurt. We talk about it on our show. So you want to see the defense, we'll go watch one of Rick and I when we do our breakdown. But the defense this year is going to be completely different.
And if you guys watch on Sunday nights, Tim and Rick do a fantastic job covering every bit of USC, about the team, by recruiting on Trojan Conquest Live. So that's every Sunday night. You guys should check it out. Rick and Chris, what do you think about SC?
Chris, why don't you go ahead?
All right. I don't know why I agreed to do a Pac-12 show with 3 USC people, because this is going to be the most annoying, over the top like crap for the first 6 weeks of the season. I want you guys to know that in your first 3 games, you'll be favored by 30 points or more, basically. And then in the next 3 after that, you're going to be favored by about 20 to 25. So I think the only team that has even a snowball's chance in hell, and it would take some like Stanford, SC, bad vibes, randomness in the desert, is Arizona State. And we don't even know anything about them. So I'm going to have to come on this show for like the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season and listen about how great SC looked, because you're just gonna like clown stomp the first 6 teams that you play. And then on October 14th, then we finally get an idea of what you actually are nationally, and then we can actually talk about your team in a way that's meaningful. But until then, I think we should just agree to not really talk about SC until about mid-October because it's going to be unbearable.
We wouldn't have it any other way. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to keep this brief because I spoke over my time with regards to Washington State. 2 key points, and USC will win the Pac-12 and get into the college football playoff. 2 things have to happen. USC has to have a top 40 defense, and secondly, Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley has to prove that he is, as a coach, situational game management, situational mastery, be able to balance the offensive play calling with your loaded wide receiver and running back room and your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, be able to control the clock, keep your defense fresh for this season. If that happens, like I said, USC wins the Pac-12. They're in the college football playoff. Tony?
Tony, you froze up. I would add, though, that the one thing derail is injuries. You know, you saw what happened to Oregon with Bo Nix. If you see Caleb Williams go down, we do have decent backups, but injury to Caleb Williams might definitely downshift my undefeated prediction. So we'll see. Tony, what do you think?
It's going to be. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun year. I think Chris makes a really good point. The beginning of our season is very late heavy, and that's something we're not real thrilled with the Pac-12 about. But it is. They're going to be some great games. What I do like, though, is I think our defense needs a little more time to gel, and I think that this kind of gives us that time to gel. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be quite a year. All right, we talked about the Utes. Give us our. We're running a little behind, but give us our quick take on the Utes.
Tell me if you've seen this story before where Utah out of conference is like either not full strength or just loses a game it shouldn't. So with
Not
Cam,
Utah.
we don't. Right, so we don't know Rising's health really, and then they had, as Rick previously mentioned, they had their backup got hurt in fall camp. So right now they're on the third guy. Who knows who's gonna like actually play when games start. But I mean, I want nothing more than Utah to beat everyone in its non-conference schedule, and be 3. Hopefully, both teams being 3-0 headed into that UCLA game. But this just like this has the vibes of like the same Utah that does this every year, where they lose 1 or 2 out of conference and are a completely different team by the time November comes around. So like everyone in the conference is like, oh, this team is really good. And everyone nationally is like, oh yeah, but they lost to this like other Power 5 team from like from another conference. So like it's already setting up that way. I've seen this story multiple times. Seems like it happens every year. So like on that note, you guys can talk about the specifics, but I'd like to congratulate Utah on its 3rd consecutive Pac-12 championship after it loses like 4 games.
So the question mark, the quarterback, I did think that Whittingham said that if he wasn't 100%, he wouldn't be in that. He won't be playing in the Florida game, which is really going to suck because we're going to see, instead of being in the swamp, we're going to see, especially a big team, right? Those SEC teams are really big. I want to see these guys do what all the Pac-12 teams do is suck win in the 4th quarter. But these big, gigantic SEC linemen, they really have been sucking win, maybe even the 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, because that's when a lot of teams go to die, is in the 4th quarter up in Salt Lake City. I think with Jaquindon Rogers, he's a great running back. I'm hoping with that great offensive line and Jaquindon Rogers, they can try to get past. I don't even know who's their 3rd string quarterback. I don't even know who that even is. But if they can get past those first couple of games, it's really important because just for the narrative for the season, we saw what they did last year when Utah lost. And like you said, they do. That for some reason, Utah just decides to drop games early in the season and then catch fire later on. They lost a lot of guys on defense. I think none bigger than Clark Phillips III, who basically, if you have a corner like that, it's going to shut down a whole side of the field. It really makes the defense that much better. So if health is going to be an issue, it sounds like they're pretty screwed at quarterback for a beginning, but this is a talented team, and they always play strong and they play people, and they got UCLA at home. Thank God USC has them in the Coliseum.
So this is also Utah's last year in the Pac-12, and I guess you could look at their season as if, because there's a lot of ifs surrounding Utah, especially in the last week and a half. If Kyle Whittingham would have put a no-contact jersey on I think his name is Brandon Rose. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But the number 2 quarterback, if he would have put a no-contact jersey on him, maybe things would be different. If Cam Rising can recover from ACL surgery in 7 months to get contact before he goes against a tough SEC team that's going to come into Rice Eccles and want revenge because they've been hearing how bad they are, how bad they've been all year, even though Utah should have won in Gainesville, and then they got boat raced by Oregon State in a game they really didn't want to be in. So And then you got to go to Baylor, and that's not going to be easy either. And that's a preview of a Big 12 matchup. So if is going to be big. What do? Do you put Cam Rising in now before he's ready because you injured or you contributed to the odds increasing of getting your backup quarterback injured? Now they do have a stout defense, and that's going to have to keep them in the game. And Jacundon Jackson, the running back. You got Brent Keithy back, the tight end. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's coming off of ACL surgery from early last year. So you have pieces there. But the first two games we're going to get to see a lot of these if questions either answered or not answered. And they are leaving the Pac-12, so nobody's really going to go ahead and give them a hard time. Their success or lack thereof, they'll be reminded by their little red, or actually blue-headed stepbrother, BYU, who's in the state. So, and they'll be reminding you a lot. As far as Utah, glad to have you in the conference for 15 minutes. Take your set of steak knives and good luck in the truck stop conference.
Hard to top that. I'm really worried about Rising. I know a lot of people, all the Utah fans say it shouldn't be. I'm sure he'll be fine by the time SC comes around. But yeah, I really think for the good of their program, they need to beat Florida. They need to beat Baylor. I think they won't have any trouble with Weber State. And then we'll see what happens from there. All right, guys. Last but not least, the Dogs. The Dogs who ended the Pac-12 just like they ended the Pacific Coast Conference, which we'll get to in just a minute. What did you guys think here of Washington?
I love Dubs. I love Penix. I love their wide receivers. I love their head coach. I love their team. I think that they are, with Oregon and SC as the three favorites to win this conference. I personally just think of them a tad bit lower than the other two from just a pure talent perspective. But, they're obviously also a really, really good team that I think is, because of Utah's injuries concerned and all the ifs that we're talking about, I've kind of started to make it a top 3 instead of a top 4, which I will definitely be eating crow on because this is what Utah does every single year. But yeah, no, I put Washington up with Oregon and SC as probably the class, but I put them a little bit lower than the other two. But they're obviously more than capable, just as capable as anyone else of winning this conference.
Yeah, what the board did last year, that turnaround in Washington, was there were a lot of great stories like that, the big turnarounds, and Penix was a big part of that. Obviously, having a great season, being reunited again with the board. They had a pretty good offensive line last year that kept Penix, upright. Penix has always had some issues in the past with some health concerns. We all know he has the talent, but just like Oregon, they're losing a lot. They're losing a lot of guys on the interior offensive line. Again, all those line calls. It'll be interesting to see will Penix and will Nix not having the lines that they had. Will they kind of revert this year to some previous years? That will be the big question. But when you have Odunze, Polk, and McMillan as your receivers, three, but probably one of the better offensive rooms in general. But as far as wide receiver rooms in the country, so he's gonna have a lot of targets to throw to. And then we talked about Trice earlier when we talked about Latu. Guy's just a difference maker he could lead the Pac-12 in sacks. I think they're gonna be every bit of what they've been set out to be this season. And I'm just glad USC has them at home.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch Washington in DeBoer's second year. You laid out the offense, Tim and Chris. We know that's not going to be an issue. The defense, arguably, they have the best edge defender in Braylon Trice. Pro Football Focus had the national leader in pressures with 67. He had 9 sacks. He's also going to be, returning to help him on the defense. His 2020 All-American ZT ZTF. I can't believe he's still on the team. And then also on the interior, led by 6-year defensive tackle Tuli. Letuliagosanoa. I think I got it right. So they got a Tuli as well. So one of the question marks they're going to have is their secondary. They gave up just over 250 yards a game. So their secondary is going to have to shore it up. They've got the pass rush, but they are going to be tested by the likes of Oregon, USC, Utah, and Oregon State and Washington State. A lot of different teams in the Pac-12. But look for that game at the Coliseum to be a difference maker. If it was in Seattle, I would obviously have Washington favored, but that is going to be a key game to decide the Pac-12. So looking forward to seeing a good season by Washington. Tony.
First of all, thank you, Slap Happy, for the super sticker. We really appreciate it. That helps the channel, helps Mark and the community. So thank you for that. Guys, everybody is on this Washington train, which gives me a little bit of pause because they're really good, but I am not sure if they're quite as good as the nation thinks they are. But I think they're going to be real good. I'm really, really looking forward to that USC Washington game. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. And also more rumors yesterday. Speaking of Washington State, that Jen Cohen and Pat Shun, together with Heather Like and Desiree Reed-Francois, are 4 of the likely finalists for our AD jobs. We'll see what happens there. All right, moving on, guys. So we had a nice, fun, quick look at the preseason there. But now let's dig into what's going on with the conference itself. The burning down of the pack through its own deeds. So first of all, guys, I don't know if you guys have heard, they are bringing in the big guns. Condoleezza Rice and Jerry Yang, Yahoo founder, have been tasked by Stanford with helping solve their problem. And former President Bush is working on behalf of SMU. So guys, just real quickly, can these big guns help pull a magic or a rabbit out of the hat in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or the ACC?
So I have a real quick question for you, Tony, because obviously Oski's on the plane, right? But he doesn't have, John Woo or whatever his name was, from that administration next to him. My question for you is the way. I wish they had Secretary McNamara, who is a devout Cal Bear, but he unfortunately recently passed away. The way that people used to like to talk about how UCLA rode USC's coattails into the Big Ten, regardless of whether that's true or not. I'd like to give Stanford a shout out for seemingly taking Oski on all of these trips. I personally, because I think it's actually, when you argue the competitive standpoint stuff, Oregon and Washington don't really help USC and UCLA's travel that much. And I don't even think it's necessarily good for us from a competitive standpoint if we're playing them every single year in that conference. I think it could actually be a disadvantage if all of those teams are playing each other. I would love to have Cal and Stanford in the big, because maybe eventually they'll rebuild. Stanford, it's not that long ago from Stanford's Christian McCaffrey, Jim Harbaugh, really good teams. You have to go a little bit further back for Cal, for Tedford. They're both obviously in very, very low points. But I think some of the stuff about them not investing in their football team is a little bit of a misnomer. I think it's just a different, in terms of from a financial standpoint. I would love to have them, even if it's at a 1/3 share, whatever it is, they get them in, because I think it behooves UCLA and USC to have them in the conference. But aside from that, I'm not going to pretend to know what kind of calls Condoleezza Rice is making for Stanford, or what George W. Bush is saying on behalf of SMU to these different conferences. So I'll leave that to the experts.
Just to piggyback on what you said there, it's complete disadvantage if USC is to be playing Oregon and Washington and UCLA every year when you have teams in the East playing Rutgers and Indiana and Northwestern. all the time on their schedule. So I'm with you as well. And plus, with Cal and Stanford, they're USC's two oldest rivals. Like as far as USC, we played those schools more than any other school in football. So it would be a shame to see those weekenders go away. So I'm really hoping that that does happen as well.
Yeah, I have no idea where they're going to go. I don't know if Condoleezza Rice and George Bush make a difference. It's the TV networks. To me, them speaking out is just fluff. Whether they're going to go to the ACC, whether Stanford's going to go independent, whether they both go or one of them goes to the Big Ten, I don't know. That's not my problem. That's the Pac-4's problem, and that's college football's problem because, hey, people, you got Joe Manchin and Tommy Tuberville going to Congress lobbying for safeguards on NIL, and within a week and a half, you have 6 teams jump into the transfer portal and are paid money by TV networks. So if that's not an NIL and transferring at the highest level, something might tell those 2 congressmen that there's an issue bigger at hand than players leaving and transferring for money. Here's a good rule of thumb. Tommy Tuberville, a Republican governor, and I'm not I don't like politics at all, but I just observe things. Here's a Republican congressman that wants assistance, guidance, regulation from the federal government. That is like the South never wants the federal government getting into their business, but he wants to bring the business. What does that tell you? He is getting phone calls from coaches, ADs, and possibly Greg Sankey. Hey, we got to do something about this NIL. Everybody's competing right now, and we're not going to be able to hit our targets in terms of national championships and keep the South the way it's supposed to be. So whenever you see a Republican congressperson going to get federal help, that tells you there's an issue.
I like it. All right, guys, taking a look just real quick for an update on folks. So we mentioned this. Stanford, Cal, and SMU are trying to pull out all the stops with the Big Ten and ACC. So we'll see what happens as far as Washington State, Oregon State, and potentially San Diego. Excuse me, I'm coughing. San Diego State as well. The Pac-12 or the Pac-4, particularly Washington State and Oregon State, we're told today by some reporters, they are driving the work with consultant Oliver Luck. Oliver Luck, father of Stanford quarterback Andrew Luck, former West Virginia AD, XFL commissioner. He just put together the new United Athletic Conference for the WAC and the ASUN, is running around the country right now trying to put together options for these teams. So for those 3 particular, are the 2 in the conference, and then our friends from San Diego, right now it does not seem like there's a likely home among the other 4 conferences. The Big 12 commissioner came out yesterday and said that they are done with expansion. And there are rumors, a good friend of the show told us, we'll see if it happens or not, that they may actually change their name to the Big 16 now. So we'll see what happens there. In the meantime, we know those 2 are actively meeting with the Mountain West and the AAC, evaluating options for merging, joining up with, reverse merging, or even creating a new all-star conference of teams from different conferences. So we'll see what happens there. But we want to kind of move on to this LA Times article today. And there's actually LA Times and also some other insights from Yahoo that came out today that I thought were really interesting. And guys, I thought we kind of dwell on the 5 big points that they brought up. Hold on, let me skip that. We're going to go over that later. So this great article from the LA Times, Inside the Pac-12 Collapse, 4 surprising moments that crushed the conference. But I think there's 5 things that really stood out to me. The first one, just for a reminder, guys, and I'd love your thoughts on this. August 2021 was the decision to expand or not. If you guys remember when Texas and Oklahoma went to the Big 12, the Pac-12, everybody tried to join the Pac-12. The Pac-12 put together, and we got more details on this today than we had ever had before in more depth. Pac-12 put together a 6-person committee to look at expansion options. So among the 6 travel pairs of the Pac, there was 1 representative from each, 3 presidents, 3 ADs. Pac-12 headquarters, we know, was recommending adding TCU and Houston. And USC shut down that meeting after only about 3 of the 12 slides. But one of the things I thought the article forgot to mention was that USC and UCLA's standpoint at that point was that they were uninterested in options that paid them less money. And, people talk a lot with rose color, hindsight being 2020 of, oh, they should have done this. Well, maybe not, because it was going to result in less money for them and everyone else at the time. And the other thing I thought the article really kind of forgets is people act like this happened right before USC and UCLA left for the Big Ten. It was a year before. Guys, what did you think? Any new insights from this decision to expand or not from the LA Times today?
Well, this was all Carol Folt, right? Saying we don't want to do it. And then a year later is when it happened. I mean, how much do we think Carol knew at the time?
Yeah, I don't think they knew they were going to the Big Ten at the time.
You don't think they had any idea?
Well, they knew that, like they were, like they had said in 2019, all options are on the table.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is like that statement was before that, right? Yeah,
that statement was 2 years before that. So we know that they were looking at stuff, but
I've got zero information on it. But I right when that move happened with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, you knew that the Big Ten had to do something. And of all the viable teams out there, I did see USC, and I did say it. And I at the time said USC and Oregon, because I didn't really know a lot about money and TV marks and all that at that point. I just looked at the two teams that would look really good going. And I do think, Tony, that they may not have had the ink dried, but these kind of deals, I don't think they just spring it. There was probably a lot of talk. Sure, nothing was set. There was no given that USC was going anywhere. But I think that USC, by that point, the rest of the Pac-12 has to realize is that USC being in the Pac-12 was making considerably less than their value. And if you like USC or not, that's fine. But what happened is when USC and more importantly, the LA market, or just the brand really of USC and UCLA leaving, because now they're saying markets aren't as important as they used to be. USC was very important. UCLA was very important to the Pac-12. And they were not treated as such, like you would be treated, like you treat Alabama's and Ohio State's and Michigan's and other conferences. USC scheduling wise, Oregon scheduling wise, there have been all kinds of screw ups by the Pac-12 throughout the history of this. And the fact that USC didn't want to make even less money than they were already making, sharing the same amount of money with Oregon State, with Washington State, I think it's a solid move, because at the end of the day, they did say they had to look out for themselves. This whole thing, you're a conference. Yes, you're a conference to a point, but USC wants to be a college football power, and you can't stay in a situation where you're making 30 million, 40, 50 million when other conferences are making 80, 90, $100 million. And so to ask them to make even less money and stay competitive, that's probably too much.
Yeah, I don't know if Carol Folt knew at the time, but and we'll never know.
Yeah, I don't think I know for a fact that they did not know at the time.
Yeah. So, but you have to take a look at it. Mike Bone and Carol Folt were at USC for close to a year and a half before Texas and Oklahoma left. They went through COVID, lost money there, lost money on the Pac-12 media rights deal every year. They weren't getting compensated. The revenue was never there. They took equal revenue sharing. You're looking at 2021, you fire your coach. So at some point, they're like, okay, maybe Carol Folt's like, what? I mean, we don't know what the deal is. If they're going to bring on 2-4 teams to make it 14 or 16 teams, how much less money would everybody have to take initially? We don't know what happened there, but I think the decision was made that, look, you know what? It's not going to be fiscally responsible to divvy up the pie even more. And that is kind of like the theme that has come about. It's been every team for themselves.
And we see that again. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. You're seeing that with Florida State right now. They're going to have to redistribute the revenue if they're going to stay in the ACC. Well, guess what? That was SC's problem way back in 2011 and 2012. Same with UCLA. And they did.
Their problem in the 50s too.
Exactly.
It's not new. So the next thing I thought was really interesting. This was new. I thought the details coming out of UCLA's of the UC Regents deal on UCLA. And again, this is for reporting from the LA Times and Yahoo Today. So they claimed today that the Pac-12 conference made a deal with the California Board of Regents that they would keep UCLA in the Pac-12 if two things. One, the Pac-12 would cover UCLA's $15 million breakup fee to the Big Ten, and two, that they would guarantee a minimum media payment of $52 million per year to UCLA. And that was the California Regents calculation of what UCLA would make in the Big Ten minus the cost of travel and all the extra expenses. Oregon's interim president apparently refused to offer because he said he, as the Oregon, and he, of course, he's now absolutely of nothing at Oregon. He's back to being a random professor or whatever, because he didn't get the actual president's job, but he was the interim at the time. And he may have doomed the Pac right here because he killed that deal. And Oregon's interim president, Patrick, I forget his last name, said he would refuse to take less money than UCLA. Now, under the media projections we saw at the time with the LA market, that would have meant UCLA would get like 52, everyone else would get like 35 to 40. So with that deal gone, UC Regents approved UCLA's move to the Big Ten. And this, by the way, gives us another piece of insight. We did not previously know about this backroom deal. And this extra piece of insight here about this backroom deal explains why Klyakov and the conference acted like they did in believing that UCLA was going to stay. Guys, and Chris especially, what do you think about this backroom deal?
Yeah, it's wild because I feel like the general consensus at the time was like this is a rubber stamp. The governor of California is kind of doing this for like clout a little bit and to make Cal people happy. And this was like a California politics kind of thing, but it really wasn't going to mean anything. But apparently there was some actual juice behind it, which is crazy to think about. It's also kind of like putting aside the fact that the conference blew up because this didn't happen, and I feel bad for what happened to certain teams. There's kind of some like funniness to me about the fact that Oregon was like, oh yeah, no way we're going to be in a conference with UCLA making more than us. And then you fast forward to now and they're literally in a conference with UCLA making less than them. Granted, it's only for like 6 years instead of in perpetuity or whatnot, but I find that part of it kind of funny on the Oregon side of things.
And that difference, by the way, will take about like 12 years to catch up from if they had left it. When you do the math. Rick, Tim, were you guys surprised by this?
This kind of makes sense. Like you mentioned, Chris and Tony, there was rumblings about UCLA possibly staying, and I didn't believe that at the time. But then you hear this, and all I have to say is, USC and UCLA took equal revenue sharing for up to 10, 11 years at this point. And pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. So Oregon, you're a hog of a duck. And for you to have that attitude, it's karma, right? You had 11 years to make extra money, taking it from SC and UCLA. And what did you do? You got close, but you still got zero, all right? And for some schmuck interim president to make that call, all right? And this was kind of, and who knows, if UCLA stays, you have the LA market, maybe we're not talking about the Pac-4. Maybe we're not. And maybe UCLA stays because there's political pressure. But this is karma. Now you're going to go to the Big Ten, and you're going to have to travel a lot more. But you got Uncle Phil, and you got his bags, and that'll help. But now UCLA and USC are going to probably be making 65 to 70 million to start off, and you're going to be making low 30s, and you're going to get $1 million bump every year for the next 6 to 7 years. So there you go.
All right, so we do the next one. I thought was a really interesting point. So this is what they call dreaming too big. And this also was kind of interesting here. And we've heard rumblings about this, but more details came out today. So during the Pac-12's exclusive negotiating period, ESPN offered about $30 million per school, and they believe that they would have settled for about $35 million per school. One of the Pac presidents, and we don't know which one yet, my personal guess is Stanford, because they're the great people at their graduate school business, but I don't know. We're not sure which one. Could have been Oregon too. One of the Pac presidents had a professor do their own analysis, which estimated that Pac content was worth $50 million a school. So they countered the ESPN's $30 million a school with $50 million a school. ESPN told them to take a hike and eventually sign the Big 12. Guys, what do we think about this little in-school analysis that ignored a lot of common sense?
Chris?
I don't know. I mean, the crazy thing is that, I mean, this is everything that people outside of the conference make fun of the conference for, right? This like ivory tower kind of idea of like, we know better than everyone else. Kind of, I don't know, snobbery is not the right word in this instance, right? But like, I want to know which school this came out of that was like, yeah, we're definitely worth like 50 million each at this point, when that's like, that was a ridiculous number. So on one hand, yeah, like I kind of put it on that person, but I kind of put it on Kliavkoff for not being stronger in the room as a personality, to be like, look, I know what your model says, but like these are the number that we're getting. And like you said, like, if they're saying 30, maybe they think the number's 35. We go with 39. We play the game of like meet you in the middle or whatever. And then they're fine and they move on, and none of the disaster that happens after happens. But the fact that it's one school that's just like, yeah, I got my own different numbers here than the numbers that you're like actually getting out there. So, just go back again and see what happens. It just doesn't, it really is. It's like, it's unfortunately like
and
a shining example.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I don't have anything more. It's just like, it's just a shining example of like the jokes people make of like the academic nature of the Pac-12 getting in its own way.
Yeah, it's good at that. All right, should we do the next one? Next one I thought was interesting. So this gave us some more details about the different offers that the Pac-12 was working with. So one of the things, and we talked a lot about it, we had little rumblings of this. We knew that there were multiple options that they were looking at, and that Washington was expecting. And I thought it was really interesting. So we got two more insight. First of all, on the all Apple deal, which was the final thing. First of all, we found out Phil Knight was strongly in support of this. Now, lots of jokes made about this, about people calling it Girl Scout cookies or whatever. But apparently it was fairly lucrative. Would have been more than the Big 12, even though there was an incentive-based component. And apparently everybody from Oregon to Apple to everybody else thought that they would be pretty handily beating the Big 12 number, which is probably why you heard all those comments about layup, whatever. Could have been up to 50 million off school on the high end, but the base before you got to the end of the incentives was 20, which ended up being about 25 million, started a little lower, got up to 25, was a bit too low for the risk-averse Pac. What I thought was most interesting, though, is today we got more details that in the conference's final days, as these things fell apart, they were also still having, and we talked about this on the show through contacts of ours that had told us about ESPN and App and Amazon and some other things, that there was also another four-way deal with ESPN, NBC, Amazon, and CBS that broke down in the final end. And based on what we heard from Washington President Anamari Kautse, this was the deal that she wanted. She did not want the Apple one. She liked this one, We know that Phil Knight liked the Apple deal. Guys, what do you think about these new details we got on the 2 TV offers?
Well, I can't speak for Phil Knight's motivation or Anne-Marie Gauchi's motivation. Although the UW president, she wanted a more traditional TV media rights deal, and she stated in her press conference, I think on Saturday following that Black Friday, is that she wanted her student athletes to have visibility for, and you're not going to get that on the Apple deal. And there was a 2-year out that the conference could get out of the Apple deal. And I think the Arizona president, Robbins, said it was like a Girl Scout deal. You hit your incentives and you got paid more money. And, that's kind of a pie in the sky business model that the Pac-12 was subjected to with Larry Scott owning their own TV network. And, once you pay off the startup costs, you could bring in revenue, and that never came. So I'm sure that played into some of the Pac-12 presidents making a decision that this was not the right deal for them without any other type of linear deal to supplement the Apple deal.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. I see it from like both sides with respect to like exposure or whatnot. I don't think it's the same thing as like what the Pac-12 network was in terms of not being on people's TV sets and being difficult to get. And I actually think Apple does like a pretty good job with its sports products. And I think that they're trying to expand that to be a real thing. You look at how I don't even follow the MLS, and like every other day I see something on my timeline about what Messi is doing. But like, I don't know. I think the Apple product might be a thing here in 5 or 10 years, but I can understand a conference that was sold a similar bill of goods, by Larry Scott saying, oh, this is the future, this is the way to do it, and having it go absolutely terrible. Even if it is a good thing and turned out to be this great thing, I can see why a conference that had that experience in the past not being super gung-ho to try it again with the next new thing.
All right, should we look at the next one? Next lesson, the final hour. So here he talked a little bit about the final hours, and this we've talked about a little bit here, but just sort of had it reiterated. Amidst the chaos of Colorado's hasty departure, all eyes were on Washington, Oregon, and going into Black Friday. And this was reiterated once again. And the Arizona people disagree with this. We talked on this channel over a year ago. We were told by contacts at Arizona, and we talked about on this show, that Arizona wasn't going anywhere without Arizona State. And the Michael Crow drives the bus in Arizona. And that was confirmed to us by Robbins, by Crow, by PAC sources, and now here in the LA Times as well. Going into Black Friday, all 9 schools were committed to sign that PAC deal with Apple and expected to sign it until Oregon, and driven by Washington made the last-minute decision to leave for the Big Ten, and Oregon followed. And the interesting thing is when you actually look at it, and if you do the math, what I think is wildest about that is that Washington is going to make less money net in the Big Ten for up to about 10 years, if you kind of do the math, than they would have if they just signed a thing in the Pac-12. So, I'm excited for Washington. I'll tell you, if you watch President Kautsay, and she's wonderful, but you watch her presentation, she wanted to be in the Big Ten, and they're taking less money to do it when you actually, again, run the numbers.
At a certain point, I feel. Oh, let me ask a question. But like, I feel like at a certain point, especially for like the Washington and Oregon, as soon as they saw USC and UCLA go to the Big Ten, that was, I think, what they wanted. They saw where things are going and they wanted a seat at the table. And I think it was a little bit harder for them to get than they wanted it to be. And I feel like this is they might be taking less money or whatever, but they wanted a seat at that table. and they're going to take less money in order to guarantee that for themselves, right?
Do you mean just like they did last time this happened? So just a reminder for you guys who don't know, as Chris pointed out, and Chris, I totally agree with you on that, but Washington did this exact thing last time, where Washington in 1958, as the Pac-12, or the Pac-12 was being formed by USC and UCLA and Cal, and Washington felt left out, and Washington actually kind of screwed around and sort of sabotaged the remnants of the Pacific Coast Conference, and then quit and left it, and it collapsed. 65 years later, the exact same thing happens again. Or 65? I'm not doing math. It's too late. Anyway, they did the exact same thing. And the funny thing is that the quote, once again, from the Washington State president who felt left out in 1958 was, he was stunned. And the quote from the Washington State president a week and a half ago was, he was shocked. So pretty wild, guys. Not the first time.
Now, Tony, you know this whole topic's never been my thing at all. Once I knew, well, I mean, because I did. When this all started going down, I knew USC was going to the Big Ten. Two questions for you, so I'm understanding you correctly. One, what you're saying is that they were going to stay together, and then it wasn't the Big 12 that broke up the Pac-12. Pac-12.
The Big 12 was never going to be able to break up the Pac-12. It was the Pac-12 and the Big 10 who could break up the Pac-12.
You mean all those victory laps we've been hearing for the past couple of weeks are really just a lot of truck stop donuts? Is that what you're saying?
It was always, and one of the things, and we talked about this on the show, guys, a year ago, that it was always up to the Big Ten presidents. And, I think there's a lot of question, sort of, did they screw around long enough that the Big Ten presidents changed their mind? And we may never know the answer to that.
And then,
but it certainly worked out that way, that the Big Ten presidents changed their mind, and when they did, Washington jumped on board.
The final question is my understanding that this money is coming directly out from Fox, the payout for $30 million each for both of them, and that it's not, so none of the Big Ten schools are losing their revenue. This is just something that Fox is doing. Is that correct or incorrect?
New money from Fox. There's questions. I don't know if it's for sure. Whether Fox will then sort of subcontract that out, maybe to ESPN, maybe to somebody else. We'll see if they bring in another partner to cover those costs or not. But yeah, this is all new money. Nobody in the Big Ten is taking less money.
Right.
I got a question for you, Tony. In your opinion, you'd mentioned that Phil Knight liked the Apple deal, and Washington decided to go to the Big Ten, and Oregon sounded like they were ready to stay in the Pac-12, but for whatever reason, they went with Washington. If Oregon decided to stay in the Pac-12, do you think that Washington would have then gone to Stanford and say, hey, look, Oregon's not coming. We need a partner. Do you want to come to the Big Ten with us?
I would say, possibly, but I don't think it was ever going to get there. I think it was going to be, one of the two of them were going to go. Kind of like Arizona, where Arizona had a lot of mouthiness to talk about, but at the end of the day, the Arizona Regents were not letting them go without Arizona State. It was all, we're staying together. Oh, we have the. It's kind of like the way that it was described to me a year ago was that Arizona and Arizona State have the power to decide on their own. and the wording that I loved was I was told, and they have that power because they're smart enough not to use it. That they knew that they needed to stay together, and that was the expectation for the good of the state and the state system. Again, they're on the state, they're together as part of the state system there. So yeah, it was always going to be up to the Big Ten, and I don't know. I guess we don't know all the details of what the Big Ten would have done, but I think it was pretty consensus that if one of Washington and Oregon went, the other would go. And part of the Pac-12's problem is because they screwed around on this for so many months. They screwed around about it till the point where the Big Ten presidents changed their mind. And once the Big Ten presidents changed their mind, then the dam collapsed. And also, and I don't think, and I've talked to some Arizona people about this, once USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon were gone, I don't think it made sense for the new Pac-12 South schools to stick around. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, not at all. I just think it's ironic that the Pac-12 just never understood value, and that's the Champagne Larry hangover, right? Because he stayed in power for so long because he blew smoke up their rear ends for the longest time. Oh, we're going to get a deal. We're going to get a deal. And he had Michael Crow as his mouthpiece. And the LA Times article spelled it out perfectly. They thought the value was 50%, or I'm sorry, 50 million and not 30 million. How ridiculous is that? And George Kleofkoff, it's kind of like a real estate deal. If your house, you get downzoned, you lose value because now you can't scrape your house and build, let's say, a more density or a 3-story house. So you lose value. But guess what? You're going to get some lackey broker who's going to say, look, bring me offers. I don't care. My house is still worth $5 million. No, honestly, your house is only worth $3 million. Guess what? You get somebody that makes an offer on the deal and they offer $3 million and you don't negotiate with them and they know that they're right, they're going to walk away. They're not even going to counter. That's Kleofkoff's job. He has to get those presidents to understand your value is wrong. That's why he was brought in the first place, because he dealt with Major League Baseball, MGM Entertainment. It's just the perfect storm. And now what do you get? It's like day old bread. It's in the back of the freaking store and it's 50% off. And that's what Oregon and Washington are. They're 50% off.
The discount Ducks. That's what they are. That half off Huskies.
So what do you guys think about this that's going on here? We'd love to hear what you guys think. We just there's a link in the chat, or you can use the QR code off your screen there. We'd love to hear what you guys think. Oh, and we got our first caller right now. Great friend of the show, Larry Pilgrim. Larry, welcome aboard.
Hey, guys.
What's up, Larry?
Not much. Hey, sure is funny how I was screaming months and months ago how Oregon was demanding $50 million. And all of a sudden, like, I don't even know if I want to get into it. Like, it was sabotage. Right. It was sabotage from Oregon and Washington the whole time. You can't send George Kleofkoff out there to get $50 million. It wasn't out there. So it was just a long play. It was a sabotage job, and it's overdone. Big Ten got themselves 2 more good schools. The 4 corner schools ended up in the Big 12, so they've still got a spot at the table to a degree. So we'll just see what happens.
I think you guys are going to run the table over there.
I hope so. I hope so. If we can just stay healthy, this is getting old. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like Tim was saying, Cam doesn't have to be 100%. He's just got to be cleared. But I know Whittingham, he's not gonna. It's always conference first. It's conference championship first. So we'll see what happens there.
Well, Larry, what would you? I mean, so if I'm a Ute fan, I'm thinking to myself, okay, we've won the Pac-12 twice in a row. So maybe my target now is making it to the playoffs, right? Which is fine. But also, a better goal is always to win your, to win your conference. Because let's face it, he goes down, you guys aren't going to the playoffs. However, if you get conservative, you keep him out of the game. Let's say you lose to Florida, that really doesn't hurt your chances of winning the Pac-12. You keep him healthy, you give him an extra month or so to get ready, 100%. I think it sets you guys up for that. What would you want as a fan? What do you want if you had to say? What would you ask Whittingham to do?
I would ask him to put packages together for Nate Johnson is what I would do, because, I've played football. That guy's a hell of a lot harder to defend. As far as Cam, I don't know. They said that they figured it would be about the middle of August would be about the time he would even be able to practice. So he's still there. I don't know. I think Florida they're in such shambles. I think we'll be fine with a backup at Rice Eccles with that defense on a weeknight and that altitude. I think we should be fine. The road game at Baylor is the concern. I just know Witt. He wants to win the conference first. So
he just seems like a conservative guy. You know what I mean? But then again, like Rick said, if he's such a conservative guy, why has he got your backup quarterback out there without his no contact jersey on?
Well, because what was going on is Nate Johnson and Brandon Rose were out there because they wanted to see how they would react in real pressure, in real game situations. And so they did that. And from what I understand, it was kind of a freak thing. He landed on the ball. It wasn't somebody just crammed him and broke his ribs and lacerated his livery. He landed on the ball. So that's just one of those, I mean, that could happen, just tripping over yourself. So, I mean, it was live, but it was just kind of one of those freaky situations where he landed on the ball. They do have their backup their third string was actually their backup last year. Brandon Rose, he went up, won the game at Washington State. We played in both the Rose Bowls, so he's got some experience. But yeah, we're not going to have any chance at winning the conference with him. Not even close.
Anything else?
Yeah, and then as far as like Rick and I have talked about this before, I don't think unequal revenue sharing was going to keep the conference together. It didn't keep Texas. It's just teams are going where the money's at. I don't see USC wasn't going to stay.
Right.
I never saw them staying because of for one, the egos. I cannot disagree. The egos in the Pac-12 is just ridiculous. And so I wanted to get Rick's opinion on that a little bit. As far as
it comes down to, you got to put yourself in USC's shoes and UCLA's shoes. UCLA from a basketball perspective and USC from a football perspective. We built this conference, and and at the time, and you know what, I have a new segment every week. It's called Trojans Talk on Tap, and I go into this on why the Pac-12 disintegrated, the four parties that were responsible. And, a lot of things happened, with the NCAA sanctions, Larry Scott's proposed deal, owning the network, spinning off revenue, possibly selling the Pac-12 network, and all motivating factors. And USC just going on to sanctions, a new president, a dysfunctional athletic department. And it could have been the opportunity where the other schools were like, hey, fall in line. This is what it's going to be. And there's jealousy, there's ego. And hey, USC was down, and look at Oregon. I mean, look at Oregon's mentality right now. We're not going to take less than UCLA. And Oregon's had the chance, and they didn't do anything. People don't realize that USC was 6-1 in BCS games, the beginning of this century, won 2 national championships. We made a lot of money for the other 9 teams because that revenue from BCS bowls split 10 ways. So that's why I said pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. So that's the mentality that USC had. And perhaps that's the mentality where said, you know what? We're done with this taco stand. We're moving on. We're going to get paid because we gave that money and they did nothing. Washington, Oregon, there wasn't a dominant team. And as I stated, in the 11 years of the Pac-12, USC had the 3rd most wins in one of the darkest decades of USC. Name me another team that sustained as much damage from the NCAA and lived to tell about it. All right, we're tied with Utah with 88 wins. Washington has 89, and Oregon has 102.
Right, and
84.
The way I look at it, Rick, I mean, we can go back, talk about Larry Scott, all that. To me, college football is a business. USC had a promotion. That's what they took. I don't think all that other stuff, in my mind, really matters. You guys got promoted, and that's just what it is.
Well,
That's all it is.
That was the motivation to make that business decision because, look,
Right.
we withstood all that for 12 years. We're not going to take it anymore. And we moved on. And, you know, and that's just how it is.
All right. Okay. No, we're good. All right, guys. I appreciate it.
Larry, hold on one second. So I just want to say this to you. I don't think it was an error. See, people don't throw on arrogance or even say it was a business decision. It was literally a survival decision.
Yeah.
Football has changed. Football has completely changed, and it's really all about money. Yeah, Oregon did get a little bit over on USC because they did have all that Phil Knight money, et cetera. USC wasn't investing in the program like it should have done. But the fact of the matter is Oregon, with all their Nike money, if USC was getting paid the revenue, the brand that it was, right, it's actual, instead of splitting and pretty much just kind of just like the socialism that was the Pac-12 was, you know, and right. Giving away all of its wealth and then having people compete. And I got to be frank, and there was not a lot of gratitude from the rest of the Pac-12 for what USC was doing for that conference. Because, you know, you're competing against us, and I get that part of it. But at some point, USC had to say, hey, you know what? We want to compete with Alabama, Ohio State, you know, Clemson. We need to do something. And I mean, I believe Tony's tapped in on this stuff, but I do think way back then they knew what the valuation of the Pac-12 was and the fact that what they would be able to get in some deal and still keep falling farther and farther behind everybody else. And I think there've been backdoor channel conversations for a long time on what's USC's options to getting close, at least close to what the other big time programs are doing financially. Yeah, they had no choice, Larry.
No, I don't blame you. I don't blame USC. If Utah would have been in the same situation, I would be probably doing the same thing. So I don't blame USC. To me, it was promotion, like you're saying, getting left behind. But, you know, it's a business decision. I don't blame USC. I really don't. I never have. So, yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm not fine with it, but I'm going to have to live with it. So
right.
It's just the world. So, all right. Well, I'll let you guys take some more calls.
Thanks, Larry.
You bet, guys.
Thanks, Larry. Todd's asking any exit fees for teams leading the pack. That is right now being sorted out by a whole bunch of lawyers. So we will find out in the days to come. There are a lot of lawyers figuring out how that whole thing is going to work. All right. Next up, we've got one of our favorite California Golden Bears. Welcome, Alex. And by the way, thank you, Todd, for the contribution, too. We appreciate it. Helps the channel. And real quick, sorry, Alex, before you get going. Anybody, if you guys could, it really, really helps the channel and the whole community. If you could hit the like and subscribe button, it really makes a huge difference. I know everybody says that, but it really helps Mark and the whole community bring you guys this programming.
Alex, you there?
I think he might be on mute.
Oh, I am. There we go.
Alex, you're on mute. There you go.
Yo. So, did you guys see the comments by Michael Crow today, the president of ASU, about the Apple TV deal and how he thought it was the most futuristic, digitally capture multiple student athletes that you can view on multiple devices sort of spiel?
It actually, again, the stuff that we read from Phil Knight, Phil Knight's being on board, the more that I read from people that actually know the details of it, it seems like it. I mean, again, I think the Pac-12 would have been better off on the ESPN, NBC, Amazon, CBS arrangement. I think that would have been much better for them, just my personal belief. But apparently there was a lot to this Apple thing that was pretty cool. And knowing Apple, that doesn't surprise me. What did you think of it?
I mean, it's streaming. That's it. Like, it's nothing whiz bang and people were mocking ASU for, like, you know, ASU maybe in the Big 12, but they still have Michael Crow as their president, which is unfortunate for them. But I mean, you guys were talking earlier about who kind of was pushing the figure that ultimately ended in the non-deal. I think it has to be Michael Crow or somebody over there who really, because Michael Crow is also a Larry Scott fanboy, so we can just pile on him as long as we want for the reason why we now are left with a 4-team conference. But that's just that's just my thought on that. But
I agree with you 100%.
yeah. But as far as where we are now, this is what has really blown my mind for the last couple of weeks. Because I mean, I was telling Mark the weekend, like the Friday when the LA schools announced they were leaving last year, I said this conference isn't going to make it. There's never going to be a deal, and I never believed that there ever would be over the last 13 months. And so the last week and a half has not been a surprise to me at all. What is surprising to me is that I understand that Cal is kind of going to, like, I'm not expecting any direction from anybody or anybody to really say or be doing anything publicly, but I am surprised that there's almost nothing. And because Cal and Stanford have been radio silent this whole period, but for Stanford in particular, for there not to be really anybody, at least visibly, that's engaging with anybody on where the schools may be headed next, that to me is I still can't believe it.
I agree with you. I thought you guys being so radio silent had a backup plan regardless of what it was. And I had my own thoughts on that, but I agree with you though. I was very surprised that it was still kind of like, oh, we don't really know what we're doing yet.
And not even that, at least for us, it's become at least a little clearer at this point that just based on the movements we've seen from some institutions, Cal and Stanford are now almost a sacred union of sorts during this period of uncertainty. And so now I think Cal may be just sitting around waiting for, well, Stanford will get the invite and then we'll be given like it'll be a pair, right? But again, at least right now,
I'll tell you, I worry because I wouldn't trust Stanford any further than I can throw the tree.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, I never would have thought Notre Dame to be actively lobbying for us as much as them. I never would have thought that either, right? So every new development is more surprising than the last, but I think of some of the individuals involved, and just to name a couple, Michael Drake, the president of the UC Office of the President, where did he go to school? Stanford. The Notre Dame AD, Jack Swarbrick, where did he go to law school? Stanford. The Notre Dame president, where did he go do his master's? At the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley. And then you look at the campuses. Troy Taylor, the Stanford football coach, is a Cal alum. Cal just hired Mark Madsen as the basketball coach. He went to Stanford. Our women's basketball coach, Charmin Smith, went to Stanford. So there's so many people involved from across, from back and forth, that you have to think that there's some sort of like in concert actions going on. And even then, and what scenario would Stanford just get a one-off invite at this point? I'm not too sure. The Big Ten wouldn't just give. It could happen, but who would do a one-off invite? Because apparently Stanford said no to the Big 12, almost unilaterally, and killed that. So now what? I don't know who gives them a one-off.
Alex,
I
would also see Stanford joining the Big 12.
Hell no.
Do we know for sure that even happened?
I mean, I don't know a lot of this
that seems like
down, but that was the one thing I knew from the beginning. That was the one thing I knew was not going to happen, is Stanford joining the Big 12.
Oh yeah, we're okay. There are two scenarios where we'll take down the conference. One, we'll never maybe ever join the Big. Maybe we get to the end of the road and the Big, and that would probably you would see us join the AAC before we join the Big 12. And maybe even the Mountain West. Yeah, that's sort of the road to hell for us. So, and I did think about this for a while, or I've been thinking about it, because I did read somewhere that even though our path is unclear still, at least we have some control over our destiny. The ACC is a ticking time bomb. So even if we somehow are able to sneak in there, because it's still a vote, we have to just swing one vote and it's done. But we'd be walking into one frying pan to another house on fire. So, and my exasperation, not just about where Cal is at, but like Trev Alberts at Nebraska said, the next wave of realignment that comes is going to be even crazier than this one. And we just had a whole conference implode. So if we're going to have a whole sport that's just basically a Jenga puzzle for the next 5, 10 plus years, I mean, there's a thought of mine where just merge the AAC and then you at least have a stable outlook for a little while or something. But at this point, it's hard for me to really think what the next step is at this point, because a part of me is just almost like, just punt this to 2024, just play the season out. And as far as Cal in particular, the one thing I have that I'm thinking about is for red shirts, you can play 4 games. And then if you want to, you can drop out, you can take your red shirt. So we basically have 4 games to either really Wilcox has done a good job keeping the team together, even after last season, hiring Spavital, getting a good transfer class through the portal. These first 4 games may be the season. If we stumble out and then guys just start to check out, then I'm gonna start getting worried. But I mentioned when to Tony, Spav was our OC the last year of Dykes, and that was our best offense, I thought. So I'm fairly optimistic that if the offense can be, fairly decent and the defense gets back into form, we can have a solid year. So, but it's fairly critical now because I doubt we get a resolution by kickoff. But so we're still in the eye of this. Well, we're in the eye of the storm, but it's also sort of a calm now. But we don't know what's going to come next.
I'll tell you what, Cal and Stanford this is just a worse year for them to do an audition, I think, for any league. Because what Cal and Stanford have been in football. This is a nadir. I mean, this is somewhere where I can't remember since I've been watching football. I mean, actually, no, I can remember Stanford being this terrible way back when I was younger. But I mean, for Cal to be this bad, it's just the worst awful timing.
I will say that this last decade or so has been the worst run that we've ever had, and I'm still trying to wrap my hand around how exactly we went. Like, you saw what Dykes did last year. He's obviously a good coach. How is it that we had that guy, but fielding, obviously our offenses were good, but we had the worst defenses in the history of college football. We were giving up damn near 50 points a game some of those years. And now we have Wilcox, and back-to-back years we've lost to winless teams. So is Wilcox finally going to decide to be a good coach and actually do something with this program? And then with Troy Taylor's a good coach taking over at Stanford, but Stanford in the NIL transfer portal era, they're kind of sort of an odd man now in college football. And yeah, they've kind of fallen off a bit more than, because historically they've been fairly average, but yeah, right now they're kind of at a low point too. And that's going to take a few years to build up. So yeah, both schools aren't looking too great right now as far as the revenue sports.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Anything else?
Nah. Let's see. Well, and just on the news today on the realignment push, we'll see what, if anything, happens this week or the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I just kind of want the season to start and just see what we can do. So, yep, that's all I got.
We have one more year, so Alex, I say we enjoy it. Should be a good season.
Yep. You guys have a good night. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
Thank you too, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Well, guys, I'm hoping for the best here and hoping we get some good news for our friends from Cal, from Stanford, from Oregon State, and from Washington State. And I'll tell you, actually, when you take a look at, and I guess, as we get more information, we can look at more numbers. I put a lot of stuff on Twitter out there in the past week. There are some really good teams. I mean, you look at SMU, you look at San Diego State, you look at Memphis, you look at Air Force. I mean, there's some good teams that they could build a new conference out of if they needed to, and it would have some good and some fun football. So we'll see with that. All right. So, guys, I know we are over time here, but this has been fun. We had some good chats tonight. We did our preseason look that was only 3 weeks delayed by the wildness. And next week, we are starting off with the actual season, real games, which is exciting. So as we wrap up here, guys, any final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts is, again, whoever's to blame for all this crap, if it's college football or whatever, hearing from Connor when the news went down, just seeing him, I didn't talk to him, it was just on Mark's show, and just listening to Alex, the real people that are affected by this stuff as well, not just institutions, fans. I could tell Alex has been a fan for a long time, same thing with Connor. The whole thing really does suck. I'm hoping that I've heard some people say the fact that, who knows, and maybe it's pie in the sky. They're saying maybe this big model we're talking about consolidating is going to have to blow up again and it might become regional. We'll all be grandparents by then, I'm sure, or maybe even passed on. But I do feel for the teams out that are getting left behind. And I joke around a lot on the show, but I really do believe it's absolute crap what's happening to a lot of these schools.
My final comment will be cosign.
Yeah, I feel a similar way. It's the conference I've known all my life, as a kid, as a student, as an alum, and it's just a disgrace of what had happened. It didn't have to happen, but there were 4 parties that were involved, and the LA Times article was fantastic because it lays it out. It shows you how ridiculous these guys were. John Canzano tweeted it out on Friday morning, August 11th, about the disparity in $30 million offer by ESPN, and the Pac-12 presidents wanted 50. That's just insane. But it tells you why the Pac-12 is in the position it is. It's been 12 years or 11 years of just futility and ridiculousness led by Champagne Larry.
You know what, though, Rick, you made me think of something. Maybe it's better to go out like a Jess Joplin or in a blaze, right? A great season we have this year. You can be like a Hendricks or a Jim Morrison instead of lingering on, and going to just continue your career and crank it out. You got the saggy skin, almost like a zombie conference. You know what I mean? Did we want to watch the Pac-12, as beautiful as it was, end up like a zombie conference? They're there, but are they really there? So
right.
Actually, we'll go out like a supernova. We're going to have a great season. Everyone out here, and it's just going to implode. It's going to be a great season. I think it's better to go out this way than, again, can you imagine the Pac-12 lingering on as some shell of itself with all the members leaving and just a couple of members staying, like some other conference? So, I mean, I think it's a good way to go out. Actually, I'm going to say it. This was inevitable. With the way the sport was going, with all the big money in the middle and the smaller markets, the smaller brands, this was bound to happen. I'm glad it's happening. They're going to pull the Band-Aid off. It's going to be over. And I hope the programs like Cal, like Stanford, like Washington State, and Oregon State, they find homes.
Tony, can I give a shameless plug, Tony?
Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way.
I feel a little sad. In Trojans, you know what? There's one thing to cure a little sadness. It's having a good beer. And college football is almost here. And I'm going to be dropping a video tomorrow on USC, Voice of College Football USC channel. As you know, last week, one of the sponsors of USC Athletics, Stone Brewing, and USC Athletics collaborated on a beer. It's called Fight On Pale Ale. And I'm doing a beer review. It'll be dropping some content tomorrow. And then I'm going to be dropping some content on Friday, more USC football related, comparing the second year of Pete Carroll era to the second year of Lincoln Riley. Both different coaches in their own right, Pete Carroll was a failed NFL coach that nobody wanted at USC. Lincoln Riley, the opposite. Won 4 out of 5 Big 12 championships. Successful college coach, comes to USC. He's offensive minded. Pete Carroll's defensive minded. I'm going to get into it on the differences, but yet there's a lot of similarities going into the 2023 college football season, the last in the Pac-12.
It's going to be wild. I will save you guys. My 12-year-old self was rejected from voice lessons, so I'll save you singing one last time from Hamilton. But it's going to be quite a season. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be with you guys through it. So we're glad to have you guys. Let's try to keep good spirits, and let's see what happens. We got 4 more great schools that are going to find homes, and I know those homes are going to be great one way or the other. So on behalf of everybody in the Voice of College Football community, we want to thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you to everybody so much who could click like and subscribe. It makes all the difference. And to those who joined us in the chat, those who had super chats, those who texted and tweeted at us during the show, we love meeting you guys. We love engaging with you guys, and we appreciate you always. So everybody, fight on, and we'll see you next week.